I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The biggest bodybuilders are often some of the strongest. Forget what we think we know about hypertrophy, training, science, and all the current methods on building muscle today, which still, by the way, doesn't really go against my argument here. And if we look back at the history of bodybuilding and what we see now, the biggest bodybuilders back then, guys like Arnold, we're talking about a massive physique, but also someone who's massively strong. You can argue that back then when he trained, he focused a lot of his exercises not necessarily on weight, but more so on contraction, doing things like using a 40-pound dumbbell, but really focusing on squeezing the muscle. But that's not the point here. The point is that he also had the ability to lift some seriously heavy weight. I'm talking about over 700-pound deadlifts. We could even look at guys like Serge Nubret from back then. He benched with not much more than 2 plates later in his career, but there's early pictures of him lifting up to 4 plates in the gym. The point is, whether they lifted brutally heavy every single time they were in the gym or not, they were always capable of putting up some seriously heavy poundages. This strength ability that they had came from heavy progressive training done especially early on in their career. And I've seen this over and over again. If someone were to skip out on this part of their physique development, they will always be limited by how much muscle they could ultimately put on, especially later on down the line. And even if we look at examples today, mass monsters that are on the Olympia stage now, guys like Big Ramy, Nick Walker, the most massive guys on the planet. Have you seen how much they lift in the gym? It's pretty obvious. But when we talk about heavy weight training, some guys will ultimately throw in the idea that there are smarter ways to train or more efficient ways to train with less risk. And the point that I always aim to stress is heavy lifting is first relative. That's number one. Lifting heavy for me and lifting heavy for you can look completely different. And number two, lifting heavy itself isn't inherently dangerous or risky. Sure, it does pose some risk, like anything else we do in the gym, but you can absolutely train heavy and train relatively safe at the same time. Does this mean that you have to go in the gym and max out every time you lift? No. Does this mean that you have to train like a power lifter to build more muscle? No. But what it does mean is that if you're not willing to push your physique to lift some heavy progressive weights, you can do all the pump sets, the low RPE sets, the optimal training sets, and they're not going to change your physique the same way that the heavy basics will. So if your physique is currently not where you want it to be, ask yourself, are you skipping out on the heavy progressive training? Are you skipping out on the hard stuff? Are you really doing what needs to be done in the gym? If you're not, I encourage you to hit the basics hard and heavy. And if your goal is to build more muscle using proven old school bodybuilding training methods, make sure to check out all my old school mass gain programs in the description below. And as always, if you guys want to see more of the best original bodybuilding content just like this, make sure to hit subscribe.